So here's a question that I've received. So if the body is so protective of its fat stores and fat cells, how about we try and get around this protection physically, as in use something like liposuction to physically remove these cells? That would help with fat loss, right? Unfortunately, it won't, because the body will actually try and compensate for all the fuel that it has just lost. And today, we are going to get into the mechanism that is at the heart of it all. Let's now revisit our concept of the truck. How do you know exactly how much fuel is stored in there? After all, you don't always open the flap to the fuel tank and peer inside. Instead, there's something that senses the fuel and reports it in the form of a fuel gauge. And it's this fuel gauge that then determines how you use the truck. For example, let's assume you were in this area, which means you have a fair amount of fuel. You may undertake 10 jobs. You may overload the truck. But in general, you're using the truck liberally. Now let's assume you enter this yellow zone. Fuel is now becoming less, so you become more judicious. You may run the truck only in speed zones which are more optimal. Out of 10 tasks, you may take only 7 jobs because the other 3 aren't as high paying. But the moment you start entering this place, you become or you start taking more drastic actions. For example, it may be bitterly cold outside, but you'll still avoid using the air conditioner. Or you may now limit yourself to only 2 important jobs that are necessary. But at the end of the day, running out of fuel is not an option. So your behavioral patterns are completely determined by the amount of fuel you have left. Let's see how this would work in the body. Now let's assume that in the body you have fat that is stored in cells. Different cells have different amounts of fat. How would you know how much is stored? The body doesn't have the ability to open cells and peer inside or look at their size. All fat cells emit a hormone. This hormone gets aggregated and feeds through to the hypothalamus in the brain. The name of this hormone is leptin. And this in turn goes to control pretty much everything else that your body does in terms of hunger levels, in terms of activity, hormones, immunity, and metabolism. If I were to change the structure and introduce this, things might start becoming clearer. You have something that has the ability to sense how much fuel you have, which then interacts with your hypothalamus, which then controls everything else. And now you might start seeing parallels between this and how you would use your truck. For example, let's say you lose some fat and this level drops, or the fuel gauge says your fuel levels are low. Your hunger levels will go up, which is going to make you go and eat, fill the levels back, and your hunger comes back to normal. But if you remained in this state of hunger for a while and you continue to lose more fat, next thing you will tend to become more sedentary. Your activity levels will drop. Continue this a little longer, other things get impacted as well. Now this may happen to different extent in different people, but at the end of the day, your metabolism is getting impacted. Hopefully you now understand why liposuction or even unregulated crash diets will not work. At the heart of everything is this fuel gauge which is sensing what you have stored. So if you were to suddenly remove fat cells or suddenly lose a bunch of fat, this level is going to drop and in turn it is going to impact everything else. And those who have done crash diets would have experienced this. You may get extreme cravings, or you might just find that your immunity has been suppressed where you tend to fall ill more often, and in general your metabolism would get compromised. At the end of the day, successful and sustained fat loss is about being able to remove fuel without really disturbing the fuel gauge, which is then going to cause your body to try and compensate for what you've removed. The fat paradox continues. If you've enjoyed the way Trulean presents the science behind fat loss, health and fitness, please like, subscribe and do share these videos.